Hello and welcome to the RPG Blender, where we give lesser played games and forgotten settings the roll the dice they deserve. I'm your host, Game Master George, and, well, first off, let me apologize for the absence of new content. I've been working on a little bit of a personal project lately, and now that it has finally come to fruition, I'm ready to start diving into some more videos. I was planning on my first video being a look back at the previous games that we've run or talked about and ranking them according to how accessible they will be, and that will still be coming. But something just launched today that really piqued my interest, which is a little mechanics preview of the upcoming Dark Souls tabletop role-playing game. Now, it's already been stated that this is going to be based on 5th edition, which makes it something that I wouldn't normally talk about. After all, there are plenty of channels here that talk about all of the 5e news. However, I am a huge Dark Souls fan, and add to that the fact that this very much illustrates a problem that I have with the modern tabletop atmosphere. The entire reason that I made this channel was to help people realize that there are other games besides 5th edition that can do what you want better than 5th edition can. Dark Souls is not something that is meant for the type of gameplay that 5th edition represents. Now, as always, let me remind you that I don't hate Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I have played it plenty of times, and I've enjoyed my time playing it. But it is not right for every situation. And in my opinion, Dark Souls is one of those situations. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it as we go through this post that they threw up today. So rather than me just ranting at you here, let's go take a look at what exactly they posted. So as you can see here, this is a first look at the mechanics in this Dark Souls game. Right off the bat, they confirm that this is going to be a standalone tabletop role-playing game that uses the 5e engine. However, and this is what can give you hope, it's not the 5e you might be used to. They have been, apparently, cutting 5th edition to ribbons in order to create something that is unique. So let's start looking at these rules and talk about why I think that they really did not succeed in changing 5th edition all that much. Now, obviously, this is just a preview. This is not the final game. This is not even actual mechanics. This is just a little teaser that they've released to try to whet your appetite for the game. So things may be completely different by the time we actually get a release here. So they lead off with position. And this is meant to tackle one of the things that Dark Souls does very differently from Dungeons & Dragons. So with Dark Souls, you have two main statistics that you're using in order to survive and use your abilities. That being your health and your stamina. These both do different things. Health measures how healthy you are, and when health hits 0, you die, while stamina allows you to do things like attack or dodge. Now the problem is, Dungeons & Dragons does not have an equivalency to that stamina mechanic. Everything in Dungeons & Dragons is either spend it and done, or infinite use. So let's see how they tried to tackle that issue. We have here the position mechanic. They talk about how, what I just said, health is how close to death you are, and stamina is the energy you're expending on attacks. What they've done is combine health and stamina into position. This position mechanic is what you can use in order to make attacks or upgrade attacks. But it is also a measure of your health. The idea here being that as you spend your position to work special abilities, you're also decreasing the available health, making this a game of balancing how many special tricks you want to use while still preserving your ability to take a hit. This is touted as a big change, but really, how is this any different from the normal hit points of Dungeons & Dragons? Effectively, what you've done is rename hit points to position, and then create mechanics that spend hit points in order to be activated. You could just as easily have called it hit points, and it would serve the exact same function. The only difference here is that they've named it to position in order to take away some of that association with health. These are two mechanics which they did previously combine when they were doing their board game. And before you say that I'm hating on Steamforged Games, I own basically the entire line of the board game that I was able to get through the Kickstarter. So I definitely don't hate the board game. And the way that they did the board game is very similar to this. You have health and you have stamina on the same track, and they fill in together. But at least there, you are spending from two different sides. So you're tracking how much you have used for health and how much you have used for stamina. With this mechanic, there doesn't seem to be any kind of differentiation between what's spent for your health and what's spent to use your abilities. They talk about how they think that it would be a lot of bookkeeping for players and game masters to keep stamina separate. I disagree. I actually disagree wholeheartedly with that. It's one extra number that needs to be tracked. And in fact, you don't need to have it be anything terribly complicated. Give people a pool of, say, 5 stamina points, which can increase as you go up or as you choose to specialize in it. And then have the abilities that they want to use simply use a stamina point. This is no different from, say, the key points of a monk in Dungeons & Dragons. No one is really that confused by those key points, right? So the spirit of Dark Souls would have been better served by using some kind of mechanic like that, instead of trying to combine both of these into a single health bar. Now, there is one line in here that I just noticed, which has me a little bit intrigued. It could possibly be something interesting, or it could be a little bit concerning, and that is, position goes up gradually as you increase in level, but it is always finite and generated randomly at the start of battle. I'm a little bit confused by what that means. If that's meant to be when you actually start initiative, rather than just rolling initiative, you're also generating how much position you have for this conflict, you've kind of just created more bookkeeping rather than less. Now, I am intrigued by this, because if it's done right, it could be used to represent how in control of a battle the players are. But I am a little bit concerned that it's just going to end up being relegated to just another health pool. I would have rather seen it be split off and maintain that feel from the game. Anyway, that's position. Obviously, we don't know all of the exact mechanics of it, but from this first look, it just seems to be health with another name. Next up, we have the Bloodied mechanic, with the idea here being representing what happened in later Dark Souls games, where you would get the boss down to about half health and they would suddenly change into a different, more dangerous form. This is again something that they did with the board game, and I feel it's actually very well done there, adding in an extra attack and shuffling up the order so you're not quite prepared for what that second half is going to be. And here, it's going to be a similar idea. The bosses will gain additional abilities once they reach that bloodied number. And more interesting, this will also happen for players, with players getting a few little bonuses when they reach that bloodied value. Now, there are 2 issues that I have with this. On the whole, I really like this idea, and it's something that I do regularly with my own homebrew games. Once you reach a certain part in the combat, something changes, they get new abilities, the situation alters to keep the battle feeling fresh. But there are 2 problems right here with the way that they're presenting this. First off is the idea that this is something new to Dungeons & Dragons. It's not. Bloodied, with that exact name, was a part of 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and it did the exact same functionality. This isn't something new, this isn't something unique, and this really isn't a selling point. It is a mechanic from 4th edition being updated to 5th. And that's not a bad thing, really. I don't object to that. I just don't think that, number one, this is something that is a huge departure, which really represents moving it far away from 5th edition, or that it is really the core of what Dark Souls is about. Yes, this happens with the bosses, but it's not the iconic part of Dark Souls. Cool bosses are, yes, but the idea that suddenly their mechanics change halfway through the fight isn't really a core element of Dark Souls. You could take that aspect out of a boss fight, and it could still be a fantastically entertaining experience. Take a look at many of the bosses from Dark Souls 1. Some of them are incredibly iconic fights, and they don't change halfway through. But that's a small gripe. What is a bit larger here is this is adding more bookkeeping. This is making your tracking of health a little bit more complex. When we take that into account with position, the idea that you get bloodied, are we now going to have a fixed value for bloodied, or is it actually when you reach half position? Because as we looked at with the first part, there is that element of being randomly generated at the start of battle. So does that mean that your bloodied value is going to change every single fight? Or are we going to have a set static value that when your position drops below, you're considered bloodied? I obviously want to see what this looks like in actual play, but my opinion is that this adds additional bookkeeping, which they have previously stated they don't want to do. Is it really that much easier to track this bloodied value than it would be to track a pool of stamina points? I don't think so. Especially since once you hit that value, now you're going to have little bonuses that get added on. And little bonuses are, honestly, what 5th edition has tried to pull away. The idea of 5th edition was streamlining the Dungeons & Dragons experience, taking away all of those little situational +1, -1 modifiers that you got from older editions, and streamlining it into the advantage-disadvantage system. So in doing this, you have moved away from the core of what 5th edition is about. In which case, why are we using 5th edition for it? All right, let's keep going and talk about the magic. They are bringing in a flexible, new system here, which is, I'll admit, matching very well to what they do in Dark Souls, and that has me very happy. The standard Dark Souls magical mechanic is not that much different from the way Dungeons & Dragons handles it. Now, I'm talking, by the way, about when you have attunement slots and then spell casts, versus Dark Souls 3, where you have your flower power bar. And that is what they're trying to do here. You will get attunement slots, each spell taking up a certain number of those slots, and then each spell will have a specific number of casts. This perfectly fits with what's in Dark Souls. It's also almost exactly what 5th edition does already. Spellcasters get spell slots. You use them to choose what spells you're going to have for the day. The difference with attunement slots is just that a more powerful spell might cost more of your spell slots. And then for the specific number of casts, well, that's just what we kind of had to do in older editions of Dungeons & Dragons, where you would prepare your spell slots in advance. So you would say, I want to cast Magic Missile 5 times today, so I'm going to assign it into 5 of my first level spell slots. Here, the difference being that the spell itself tells you how many times it can be used, which is fine. That is a distinction. But really, it just feels like the old way of handling magic. There's no flexibility in being able to choose how many times on the fly you want to cast each spell, which is not a problem. I don't dislike this change. I kind of miss my old wizard where I had to fill out my spell book and each day I had to choose how many times I'm going to cast each of my spells. It made playing a wizard feel very preparatory, but that's not the way 5th edition is. So this is another spot where they have decided to make a radical departure from 5th edition, which honestly, I would say I like. This is the change that I like the most. And it is the one that I think best represents Dark Souls, from what we've seen so far at least. So on the whole, the magic system, I'm good with. I like this. I still think it could have been done better in a different system. Heck, but I'm not hating on it. Now we get to what is the biggest departure from 5th edition, and that is the fact that you can actually die. Everyone knows that once you hit a certain point in Dungeons & Dragons, there's no more death. You just continue on. Your characters are basically immortal and incredibly hard to defeat. You need only take a look at Reddit to see how many posts people make about having trouble killing their party members or providing them with any kind of real lethal threat. And it seems like they're trying to counter that here. You hit 0 position, you're dead. It makes sense. It's not really in the spirit of 5th edition, but that's fine. We're, as they said, cutting 5th edition to ribbons. And then you respawn at the bonfire. So really, death is not permanent, but that is fine. That is the way that Dark Souls is supposed to be. You're supposed to die and die repeatedly, and then come back at the bonfire and try again. But this is where I think that they actually did something really cool. And that is with the idea that there is a significant risk that you'll lose part of yourself. As they say here, you begin your campaign with a character concept, and each time you die, you risk parts of yourself being whittled away, leaving you a husk, a mindless hollow. That is cool if they do it right. That said, other games have had this idea of a finite number of deaths, or with parts of you going away. I don't think that this really screams 5th edition at this point. This is where I think the biggest departure is going to be, with this death system. And then we get to one part which people are probably going to hate, and that is, if half your party dies, the whole party fails and resets to the bonfire. So gone are the days of the glass cannon, I guess, because your glass cannon goes down, your entire party is at risk of going down. This is something that I also had an issue with the Dark Souls board game, the idea that once one person goes down, you fail and you need to reset back to the bonfire. I understand why it's done. It's meant to make it more lethal, more challenging. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad goal to strive for with a Dark Souls game. But I don't think that this is going to go over very well. I don't think that that translates well to a tabletop role-playing game. But with half your party dies, all of a sudden becoming a tank is less important. Your defenses become less important because your squishy party members over there, if they go down, you go down too. You have a party of 4 people. If 2 people go down, let's say your squishies, your rogue and your wizard go down, all of a sudden your tanky paladin and cleric go down as well. I'm not immediately 100% opposed to it, but I don't think it's going to be something that the average player of Dungeons & Dragons is going to enjoy. Anyway, those are what they've talked about here with the major modifications to 5th edition. You all know that 5th edition isn't my favorite system. I enjoy it, and I will play it. And with this, I will probably end up getting it. I love Dark Souls so much that I'm willing to give 5th edition another go to get to play this Dark Souls game, but there's just so much about this game that would have been better served with another system. Heck, if you wanted to keep Dungeons & Dragons, everything in this fits 3.5 extremely well. It seems like they've taken elements from earlier editions of Dungeons & Dragons and updated it to 5th edition, which isn't a bad thing. It's something that I've tried to do myself, bringing back prestige classes. But there are certain elements of Dungeons & Dragons which don't fit with Dark Souls. I want to know how they're going to handle classes. Dark Souls is inherently a classless game. You choose a starting class at the beginning, but all that does is give you some initial points. From then on, what you decide to do is very much equipment-based. You level up specific statistics in order to be able to use specific pieces of equipment. And I'm not sure how they're going to be able to replicate that here. They did an okay job of it with the board game, but this is very different. Dungeons & Dragons is very much about a standard class progression. You move up through your class tiers and get specific abilities, whereas with Dark Souls, it's supposed to be customizable, building your own character in order to match your playstyle. I'm interested to see what they're going to do there, but my gut tells me that they're just not going to do much. That this is going to end up being just another class-based game with a little bit of Dark Souls flair behind it. That said, I will probably still end up picking this up. I probably won't do any kind of review on the channel for it because, again, that's not really what this channel is about. This isn't meant to be a 5th edition channel. But I had to take a look at this one. Anyway, thanks for tuning in for my little rant about this. We'll have more traditional videos coming soon, where our tutorials, and probably that ranking video soon. But I just wanted to take a quick look at this game. I hope you've had a wonderful holiday season, that your year is going great. This year 2022, things are going to be better this year, and I wish you a year full of lots of gaming, of whatever system you choose to play. Anyway, thank you again, and remember, there's gaming outside the Forgotten Realms.